Do you know that feeling when you know someone but you really have no idea who they really are? That's exactly what happened to Lucas. He was one of those guys who judged everything by appearances, you know? The kind of person who looks at someone and immediately jumps to conclusions. And it was precisely this trait that led him to make the biggest mistake of his life. It all started on an ordinary afternoon, the kind of day you'd never imagine would completely change your life. Lucas was in a simple downtown cafe when he saw Emma for the first time. She was sitting alone, wearing simple, slightly worn clothes, and an old notebook where she was writing something with impressive concentration. Her hair was haphazardly tied up, and she had that air of someone carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. To Lucas, she was just another poor girl trying to survive in the big city. He had no idea that this unassuming young woman held secrets that would keep anyone awake at night. Secrets involving hidden fortunes, false identities, and a life story so surprising it seemed like something out of a movie. But at that moment, Lucas could only see what was on the surface. And that limited vision was about to cost him dearly. Because sometimes, my friend, sometimes the simplest people are the ones who have the most extraordinary stories to tell. Emma was living proof of that. Lucas had always had it easy in life. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, studied at the best schools, and never had to worry about money or what people thought of him. He was handsome, charming, and knew how to use that to his advantage. He worked at the family business, more out of obligation than passion, and spent his days between boring meetings and lavish parties. For him, life was simple. There were people of the same social standing as him, and then there were the others. Emma clearly belonged to the latter category. At least that's what he thought. That day at the cafe, Lucas wouldn't have even noticed her if it weren't for a twist of fate. He was waiting for an important client who was late, and while scrolling through his phone, bored, his eyes ended up landing on her. There was something different about Emma. It wasn't just the simplicity of her clothes or the discreet way she behaved. It was something in her eyes, a depth he couldn't explain. But Lucas quickly dismissed those thoughts. After all, he had more important things to worry about, or at least that's what he thought. Because life has a very particular way of putting the right people in our path exactly when we need to learn the most important lessons. And Emma was about to teach Lucas a lesson he would never forget. By the way, before we continue, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching this video from? I love knowing where you're from. Now let's go, because the story is just beginning, and believe me, you won't want to miss any detail of what's to come. Fate has its ironies, you know? Sometimes it brings people together in such an unusual way that it seems like a movie script. And that's exactly what happened when Lucas spilled hot coffee on Emma. Yes, you read that right. That self-absorbed guy, always so careful with his expensive clothes and impeccable image, tripped over his own feet and spilled half his coffee right on the notebook where Emma was writing. The dark liquid quickly spread across the pages, blurring the words she had written so carefully. For a second, Lucas froze. It wasn't so much because of the mess he had made, but because of the expression on Emma's face. She didn't scream. She didn't become hysterical as he expected. She just looked at the soaked notebook with such deep sadness that it was almost unsettling. It was as if he had destroyed something far more valuable than simple notes. Lucas tried to apologize, offering money to buy a new notebook, to pay for her clothes to be cleaned, anything. But Emma simply shook her head. It wasn't about the money, she said in a calm voice that contrasted sharply with the situation. That notebook contained things that couldn't be bought. Memories, thoughts, pieces of her soul. Lucas was at a loss for what to do. He was used to solving everything with money, but here was someone who clearly didn't care about that. And that made him curiously uneasy. There was something about this girl that affected him in a strange way. Perhaps it was the dignity with which she handled the situation, or the way she didn't treat him with the reverence he was used to receiving. Emma simply gathered what remained of her things, thanked her politely but distantly, and stood up to leave. That's when Lucas did something completely out of the ordinary for him. He gently took her arm and asked if he could somehow compensate her. Not with money, but with time. He could help her rewrite what had been lost. He could listen to her talk about what was in the notebook. Anything. Emma stared at him for a long moment, as if assessing whether he was sincere or not. There was something in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't expected to find. After a pause that seemed to last an eternity, she agreed. But on one condition. They would meet at that same cafe the next day, and he would have to promise not to try to impress her or act as if he were better than her. Lucas agreed, unaware of what he was getting himself into. That night he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. There was something about her that deeply intrigued him. She didn't fit any pattern he knew. She didn't seem interested in money, wasn't impressed by his car parked outside, didn't react to the expensive watch he wore. It was as if she lived in a completely different world from his. And in a way, she did. The next day, Lucas arrived at the cafe before the appointed time. He was nervous, which was ridiculous. Why would he be nervous to meet a girl he had met by chance? But there was something different about it all. When Emma arrived, she was wearing the same simple clothes, but there was a discreet smile on her face. She sat down opposite him and, without much ceremony, began to talk about the notebook. It wasn't an ordinary diary, she explained. It was a collection of stories, observations about the people she met, reflections on life. Emma liked to write. It was her way of processing the world. And in that notebook were months of work. Lucas listened with an attention he rarely devoted to anything. There was something mesmerizing in the way she spoke, a genuine passion he hadn't seen in a long time. As they talked, Lucas began to notice details he had missed during their first meeting. The way Emma chose her words, the sharp intelligence behind seemingly simple comments, her knowledge of art, literature, philosophy. It wasn't the superficial knowledge of someone who had read a few popular books. It was profound. It was real. And that began to confuse him. Who was this girl? Where did all that wisdom come from? Emma noticed his intrigued expression and smiled. You're wondering how a poor girl like me knows so much about these things, aren't you? Lucas felt awkward, but didn't deny it. Emma laughed, but it wasn't a cruel laugh. It was more as if she were used to that kind of reaction. She explained that she had spent a lot of time in public libraries, that books cost nothing when you knew where to look, that knowledge was priceless. But there was something in the way she spoke that didn't quite add up. A subtle contradiction that Lucas couldn't identify. It was as if she were telling the truth, but not the whole truth. The two continued to meet. What began as an attempt by Lucas to make up for the coffee shop incident turned into something more. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. Emma had such a different worldview from his that it was refreshing. She saw beauty in simple things, found meaning in moments he would consider banal. And little by little, without realizing it, Lucas was changing. He began to question things he had always taken for granted. The value of money, the meaning of success, the importance of truly knowing people beyond appearances. Emma was like a mirror reflecting everything that was wrong with the way he lived. But she was never condescending, never made him feel bad about who he was. She simply existed, authentic and true, and that was enough to make him want to be better. Lucas's friends began to notice the change. He was less interested in parties, less concerned with appearances, more present in conversations. When they asked what was going on, he mentioned Emma. And of course, being who they were, they wanted to meet her. Lucas hesitated. He knew his friends could be cruel, could judge Emma by her appearance, by the simple way she dressed. But Emma insisted it was okay. She wasn't afraid of being judged, she said. She'd been through worse. And that's how, one Friday night, Emma truly entered Lucas's world. They met at a fancy restaurant, the kind of place Lucas and his friends always went. Emma arrived with her usual simplicity, but there was a natural elegance about her that no expensive clothes could buy. She greeted everyone politely but without subservience. And then something happened that Lucas didn't expect. His friends, whom he was sure would look down on her, were fascinated. Emma discussed art with a confidence that impressed even the most snobbish of the group. She discussed wines with the knowledge of a sommelier, despite having ordered only water. She made comments about international travel that showed she understood much more about the world than she let on. Lucas was confused. How did she know all this? Where did all that knowledge come from? When he asked later that night, Emma only smiled enigmatically. Do you think you know someone just because you know where they come from or how much money they have? She asked. People are much more complex than that, Lucas. We all have layers, stories we don't tell, lives we lived before becoming who we are today. And it was at that moment that Lucas realized he didn't really know Emma. He had no idea who she really was. And the more time he spent with her, the more mysteries appeared. The following weeks were an emotional roller coaster for Lucas. He was completely smitten with Emma, but at the same time increasingly intrigued by the contradictions he perceived in her. There were moments when she seemed exactly as she claimed to be. A simple girl, struggling to survive, finding joy in small things. But there were other moments, small slips, when something completely different shone through. Like the time they passed an art gallery and Emma made a casual comment about a rare painting on display. It wasn't the comment itself, but the way she spoke. With the familiarity of someone who had seen that work in person, up close, not just in reproductions. Or when she casually mentioned a restaurant in Paris, and Lucas asked if she had been there. Emma seemed to realize her slip and quickly corrected herself, saying she had read about the place in a magazine. But the description she had given was too detailed, too specific to be just from reading. Lucas began to pay closer attention. He noticed that Emma's clothes, though simple, were always impeccably clean and well cared for. She had an old phone, but it worked perfectly. She never accepted money from him, but she also never seemed truly desperate financially. She said she did freelance work, but never specified exactly what. One day, driven by curiosity and, he admitted, a pang of suspicion, Lucas decided to follow Emma after one of their dates. He felt terrible doing it, but the need to understand who she really was outweighed any remorse. Emma left the cafe where they had met and walked several blocks. Lucas kept his distance, his heart pounding in his chest. She entered an old building in a modest neighborhood. Lucas waited across the street, not knowing exactly what he hoped to discover. Half an hour later, Emma came out of the building. But she was completely different. She wore elegant, discreet, but clearly expensive clothes. Her hair was loose and neatly styled. There was a different posture, more confident, more refined, and she got into a car. Not just any car, but a luxury model, discreet but unmistakably expensive. Lucas froze. What on earth was happening? Who was this woman? He saw her driving through the city and, almost in a trance, decided to keep following her. Emma's car stopped in front of one of the city's most exclusive buildings, a place where Lucas knew the apartments cost millions. The doorman greeted her by name. "Miss Anderson," he said, with the respect reserved only for the most important residents. Anderson. That wasn't the last name Emma had given Lucas. She had said her name was Emma Silva. Who was Emma Anderson? Lucas spent the entire night awake, his mind racing in 1,000 different directions. The next day, he did something he wasn't proud of. He searched Emma Anderson's name on the internet. And what he found left him absolutely shocked. Emma Anderson was the heiress to one of the largest business empires in the country. The Anderson family owned a fortune that would make Lucas's own assets seem like pocket change. There were photos of her at social events, always discreet, always behind the scenes, but unmistakably present. There were articles about her philanthropy, about the educational projects she anonymously funded, about her refusal to take control of the family business despite the pressure. Emma Anderson had graduated from 2 elite universities, had traveled the world, had access to everything and everyone. And she had spent the last few months pretending to be a poor girl for him. Lucas felt a mixture of emotions that he couldn't even properly process. Anger, for having been deceived. Confusion, for not understanding why she would do that. Humiliation for having offered financial help to someone who was probably richer than him. But above all, he felt a devastating curiosity. Why? Why had Emma created that whole charade? At their next meeting, Lucas was determined to confront her. But when he arrived at the cafe and saw Emma sitting there in her simple clothes and with that genuine smile, he hesitated. There was something in the way she looked at him, a vulnerability that didn't seem fake. And he realized that despite everything, despite all the lies, he still cared about her. He cared too much. So, instead of confronting her directly, Lucas decided to do something different. He began asking subtle questions, testing the limits of the story she had told. Emma, in turn, seemed to perceive what he was doing. There was a tension in the air, a careful dance between truth and lies. That's when Emma did something unexpected. She invited him to a place that was special to her. A place that, she promised, would explain a lot. Lucas agreed, his curiosity completely piqued. They took a bus, something Lucas rarely did, and traveled to a neighborhood he had never visited before. Emma led him to a small house with an unkempt garden. It was clearly a place that had seen better days. She took a key from her pocket and opened the door. Inside, the house was simple but full of memories. Photos on the walls, antique furniture, a sense of life truly lived. Emma guided him to a small room where there were more photos. And that's when Lucas began to understand. The photos showed a little girl, clearly Emma, but in very different circumstances. Some photos were of lavish events, but others were incredibly simple. There was one in particular that caught Lucas's attention. Emma, perhaps 10 years old, embracing an older woman who didn't seem to have any relation to the Anderson family he had seen online. "That was my grandmother," Emma said softly. "My maternal grandmother. She raised me until I was 12, here in this house. My father was an Anderson from the Anderson family you've probably heard of. But my mother was a simple woman, a teacher. They fell in love against all odds, against all the rules of his family. And for a time, they were happy. Lucas listened silently as Emma told a story he never would have imagined. Her parents had married in secret, against the wishes of the Anderson family. They had lived modestly, trying to raise Emma away from the spotlight and the pressures of the business empire. But when Emma was 12, her parents died in a car accident, and Emma was forced to return to the Anderson family, to a world of wealth and privilege she had never truly known. It was like being ripped away from everything I knew, Emma explained, her voice heavy with emotion. Suddenly I had tutors, drivers, expensive clothes, everything. But I had lost what really mattered. I had lost simplicity, authenticity, real connection with people. In the Anderson family, everyone wanted something from me. My money, my name, my influence. Nobody cared about who I really was. Emma grew up in that world, but never felt part of it. She went to the best schools, traveled the world, had access to everything. But she was always searching for something she had lost when her parents died. Authenticity. So, a few years ago, she started doing something different. She created a second identity. Emma Silva, an ordinary girl, without money, without privileges. And she began to live part of the time as Emma Silva, frequenting simple cafes, talking to normal people, experiencing life the way she remembered it from her childhood. It was her way of staying connected to who she really was, not to who fortune had made her. And then she met Lucas. And for the first time in a long time, someone looked at her without seeing the Anderson fortune. Someone saw her only as Emma. And that was incredibly liberating. But it was also frightening, because she knew that eventually the truth would have to come out. And she was afraid of losing what she had built with him. Lucas was processing all of this, trying to reorganize every moment they had spent together in this new light. "You lied to me," he finally said, his voice more sad than angry. Emma nodded. "I lied. And I'm sorry. But Lucas, everything I felt, everything I said about how I felt about you, that was real. More real than anything I've ever experienced." There were tears in her eyes now. And Lucas realized that this vulnerability wasn't part of any charade. This was the real Emma, the person behind all the names and all the identities. He had a decision to make. He could leave, feeling betrayed and deceived, or he could try to understand why someone would do something so extreme just to experience a little normalcy. And suddenly Lucas realized that maybe he wasn't so different from Emma as he thought. Both were trapped in lives that other people had defined for them. Both were searching for something more authentic, more real. The difference was that Emma had had the courage to do something about it, even if in an unconventional way. But now came the really hard part. What would they do with all this truth? The revelation changed everything, but not in the way Lucas expected. He didn't leave that house angry or feeling betrayed. In fact, he left with a deeper understanding of who Emma really was. And ironically, now that he knew her true identity, he saw her as more human, more vulnerable, more real than ever. In the following days, they had long conversations about identity, about what it means to be true to oneself, about how money can be both a blessing and a curse. Emma told him about the constant pressure from the Anderson family, about the expectations that she take over the business, about how every relationship she had tried to have had been poisoned by money. People either wanted something from her or were intimidated by who she was. There was never a middle ground. "With you it was different," she explained in one of their meetings. "You saw me as just Emma. And yes, at first you judged me for being poor, which wasn't nice, but at least it was an honest judgment. And then, when you really got to know me, you cared about who I was as a person, not what I had or didn't have." Lucas had to admit she had a point. How many times had he interacted with people solely because of their connections or status? How many times had he himself been valued only for his family name? Emma had found a way, though not a perfect one, to escape that trap. But now there was a new dynamic between them. Lucas knew the truth, but the rest of the world didn't. Emma made him promise to keep her secret, at least for now. She still needed that refuge, that version of herself that could exist without the weight of the Anderson name. And Lucas agreed, even though he knew it would complicate things. And it really did, because now Lucas had to live in two worlds as well. There was the world where he met Emma Silva in the simple cafe, where they talked about books and dreams, where everything seemed simple and uncomplicated. And then there was the real world, where Emma Anderson was one of the most influential people in town, where Lucas's own family did business with the Anderson family, where a connection between the two of them would have enormous ramifications. It was at a business dinner that the two realities collided spectacularly. Lucas was there with his parents, representing the family business in an important negotiation. And who was on the other side of the table? Members of the Anderson family's board of directors. And among them, to his utter shock, was Emma. But not the Emma he knew. This was Emma Anderson in her full form. Impeccably styled hair, designer suit, an authoritative posture he had never seen in her before. She conducted the meeting with sharp competence, negotiating terms with a businesslike coldness that contrasted completely with the warm woman he knew. When their eyes met for the first time in that room, there was a moment of mutual recognition. Emma blinked, almost imperceptibly, a silent warning. They couldn't recognize each other. Not there. Not like that. Lucas spent the entire meeting in a state of surreal disconnection. He listened to Emma, or rather Miss Anderson, discuss contract clauses and profit projections with an authority that was simultaneously impressive and disconcerting. Who was this woman? Was she the same person who had cried in his arms when he told her about her parents? The same person who laughed with him about silly things at the cafe? After the meeting, Lucas found himself stuck in a formal reception. He needed to speak with Emma, but she was constantly surrounded by important people, discussing business, networking. It was her element, and she navigated that world with an ease that made it clear that, although she might prefer the simplicity of her life as Emma Silva, she was absolutely capable of being Emma Anderson when necessary. Finally, in a moment of carelessness in the crowd, Lucas managed to get close to her. They were on a balcony, half hidden from the other people. "You're amazing," he said simply. Emma smiled, but there was weariness in her eyes. "This isn't me being amazing, Lucas. This is me doing what I need to do. It's a performance, just as Emma Silva is a performance. The truth is, I no longer know which is the real me." That confession hit Lucas hard, because he realized that Emma was trapped in an impossible dichotomy. She was neither completely Emma Silva nor completely Emma Anderson. She was something in between, something the world didn't have room to easily accommodate. And he was beginning to understand that perhaps the problem wasn't with Emma, but with a world that insisted on categorizing people into rigid boxes. In the following days, Lucas and Emma met in secret, far from both simple cafes and luxurious salons. They needed a neutral space, a place where they could simply be themselves. They began to meet in random places, public parks, libraries, even an old movie theater showing classic films. And it was in these meetings that Lucas truly began to see Emma as she was, a complete, complex person, full of contradictions, but fundamentally honest about her search for authenticity. Emma told him about her philanthropic projects, which she kept secret even from most of her family. She funded schools in poor neighborhoods, scholarships for gifted children who would never otherwise have the opportunity, and arts and culture programs in underprivileged communities. She used her fortune to make a difference, but without seeking credit or public recognition for it. "Because if I do it publicly, it becomes about me, about the Anderson family, about our image," she explained. "I want it to be about the people being helped, not about me feeling good about helping." Lucas was beginning to fall in love, not with the poor girl he'd met at the cafe, nor with the powerful heiress from the business meeting, but with the real person who existed between those two identities. And that scared him, because he knew a real relationship between them would be incredibly complicated. How would they explain it to their families? How would he deal with the fact that Emma was significantly richer and more powerful than him? How would they navigate a world that would constantly judge them? But before he could resolve these issues, something happened that forced everything to surface faster than either of them was prepared. One of Lucas's friends, the one who was particularly gossipy, had seen him and Emma together at one of their secret meetings. And this friend, without knowing who Emma really was, did what people like that always do. He told everyone that Lucas was involved with a poor girl, and not in a way that sounded respectful. The news spread quickly through Lucas's social circle. Some found it funny, others were worried about what it could mean for his reputation. And inevitably the news reached Lucas's parents. They wanted to meet this girl. They wanted to know who she was, where she came from, what her intentions were with their son. Lucas was panicked. How would he explain? Did he have to tell his parents who Emma really was? But if he did, he would be breaking the promise he had made to her. And if he didn't tell them, his parents would probably be awful to her, judging her by her appearance, treating her condescendingly. He arranged an urgent meeting with Emma and explained the situation. She turned pale. She knew this day would eventually come, but she hadn't expected it to be so soon. They needed to decide, continue the charade or reveal the truth. And whatever the decision, it would have enormous consequences. Emma took a deep breath. "I'll meet your parents," she said. "As Emma Silva. I need to do this. I need to know if your family can accept me without knowing about the money. Because if they can't, then there's no future for us anyway." Lucas tried to argue, but Emma was determined. And deep down, he knew she was right. If his parents couldn't see Emma's worth regardless of her financial situation, it would say a lot about the values they had tried to instill in him. And then the dinner was set. Lucas was more nervous than he had ever been in his life. Emma attended in her simple clothes, her humble demeanor, her identity as Emma Silva completely in place. And the night was exactly as disastrous as Lucas had feared. His parents were polite, but there was a coldness in their demeanor, a calculated distance. They asked questions that seemed innocent on the surface, but which were clearly intended to establish Emma's social standing. Where she was from, what her parents did, where she had studied. Emma answered everything honestly, talking about her grandmother's modest home, the public school she attended as a child, the freelance work she did. Lucas's mother exchanged a meaningful look with his father. After Emma left, they wasted no time. They sat Lucas down in the living room and made their disapproval clear. "She seems like a nice girl," his mother began, with that tone that always foreshadowed a devastating, "But you need to think about your future, Lucas. About someone who could be a suitable partner for you. Someone who understands our world, our responsibilities." His father was more direct. "You're having fun with this girl, but you can't be thinking about anything serious. What will our partners think? What will the family say?" Lucas felt his anger rising. For the first time in his life, he saw his parents for what they truly were. People trapped in a world of appearances, where someone's worth was measured by their last name and bank balance. And he realized that he had been exactly like that too, until he met Emma. "I love her," he said. And it was the first time he admitted it aloud, even to himself. "And if you can't see how amazing she is, how intelligent, kind, and interesting she is, then the problem isn't with her, it's with you." His parents were shocked. Lucas had never spoken to them like that. But he continued, all the frustrations of a lifetime of conformity finally overflowing. "You've spent my whole life telling me that character matters, that values matter. But now that I've found someone with more character and more values than anyone in our social circle, you reject her because she doesn't have money? You're hypocrites." Lucas stormed out, ignoring his parents' shouts to come back. He went straight to Emma's apartment, the real one, the luxurious one she kept as Emma Anderson. When she opened the door, he kissed her. It was a kiss full of everything he had held back for so long. Passion, frustration, fear, hope. Emma pulled him inside, and they stayed up all night talking about what to do. "We can't go on like this," Lucas said. "This division between who you are and who you pretend to be is destroying us. I want to be with you, the real you, all your versions." Emma knew he was right. But she also knew that revealing who she really was would bring complications they could barely imagine. It wasn't just about the two of them. It was about families, businesses, social expectations, the very structure of the world they lived in. And then Emma made a proposal. She would organize an event, a charity gala for one of her philanthropic projects. It would be a public event where she would appear as Emma Anderson, publicly assuming her role in the family and in society. And she would invite Lucas and his family. It would be the revelation, not only to his parents, but to the whole world, of who she really was and of their relationship. It was risky. It was scary. But it was the only way to move forward, honestly. Lucas agreed. They had 3 weeks until the event. 3 weeks to prepare for the storm that was sure to come. The 3 weeks passed in a blur. Emma immersed herself in the event preparations, revealing to Lucas a side of her he had only briefly seen at that business meeting. She was a force of nature when she was in full Emma Anderson mode. She organized teams, negotiated with suppliers, coordinated with charities, all with an efficiency bordering on the supernatural. But at night, when it was just the two of them, she became vulnerable again. "Are we doing the right thing?" she wondered, lying in his arms. "Aren't we going to destroy everything we have by exposing this to the world?" Lucas didn't have easy answers. He was terrified too. He had told his parents they needed to attend an important event, but hadn't revealed all the details. They had agreed, still hoping he would break up with Emma and go back to normal. Little did they know what awaited them. Meanwhile, the double life continued. During the day, Lucas and Emma still met occasionally at the cafe, maintaining the charade from the outside world. But now there was a countdown to everything, a sense that those moments were precious and finite. They were about to enter a new reality, and neither of them knew exactly what it would be like. Emma began to reveal more details about her life as the Anderson heiress. She spoke of the endless board meetings, the decisions that had to be made about multi-million-dollar investments, the constant pressure of maintaining the family legacy. She had an uncle who wanted to take control of the business and saw her as an obstacle. She had cousins who envied her but also depended on the family fortune. There were lawyers, consultants, people whose entire careers depended on the decisions she made. "It's so much responsibility," she confessed one night. "Sometimes I just want to run away from it all. That's why I created Emma Silva. She was my escape, my breath of fresh air. But now I realize I can't live divided forever. I need to integrate these parts of myself, even if it's scary." Lucas had his own revelations. He realized he had spent his entire life doing what was expected of him, never truly questioning whether it was what he wanted. Working at the family business was a predetermined path, not a conscious choice. His friends were people he had known since childhood, not necessarily people he would have chosen. Even his hobbies were approved and socially acceptable. Emma had awakened something in him, a hunger for authenticity he didn't even know he possessed. And then came the night of the event. The gala would be held at one of the city's most luxurious hotels. Emma had chosen the education of underprivileged children as the main cause, one of her most personal projects. She had invited all the important names in the city. Business people, politicians, social figures, and at the center of it all would be her, Emma Anderson, finally taking her place publicly and unequivocally. Lucas arrived early with his parents, who were impressed by the magnitude of the event. When they saw it was organized by the Anderson family, they were even more confused. Why had they been invited? What was the connection? Lucas said nothing, only asked them to wait and see. The hall was dazzling. Flowers everywhere, sophisticated lighting, an orchestra playing classical music. The guests began to arrive, a parade of power and influence. And then, in a moment that seemed to stop time, Emma entered. She was absolutely stunning. She wore a ball gown that was simultaneously elegant and powerful, her hair styled in a sophisticated yet natural way. But what truly caught the eye was how she carried herself. There was a confidence there, but also an authenticity. She wasn't just pretending to be Emma Anderson. She was being herself, completely, all parts integrated into one person. Lucas's mother choked on her drink. "That's the girl?" she whispered, incredulous. His father was equally shocked, his mind clearly racing to connect the dots. If that was Emma Anderson and she was the girl Lucas was dating, then… Emma walked to the stage and took the microphone. Her voice was clear and confident as she began to speak. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Emma Anderson, and I want to talk to you today about something very personal to me." She told her story. Not all of it, but enough. She talked about losing her parents young, about growing up in two different worlds, about the struggle to find identity and purpose when you're born into privilege but want to make a real difference. She talked about her educational projects, about why education was so important to her. And then she said something that made Lucas's heart stop. "During the last year, I lived an experience. I spent time living as an ordinary person, without the privileges of the Anderson name, without the fortune, without the doors that automatically open for me. And that experience taught me more about the world and about myself than all the years of privileged education." There was a murmur in the crowd. It was unexpected, vulnerable, much more honest than the corporate speeches everyone expected. And during that experience, Emma continued, her eyes now searching for Lucas in the crowd. "I met someone who saw me without the filters of money and power. Someone who, after truly getting to know me, taught me that it's possible to be all parts of who we are without having to choose." She gestured for Lucas to join her on stage. He hesitated, feeling all eyes of the crowd on him, but then stood and walked over to her. When he reached her side, Emma took his hand. "Lucas," she said, both to him and to the crowd, "you knew me as Emma Silva, a person without fortune, without connections, and you saw me. You truly saw me. And when you discovered who I really was, you didn't change. You weren't intimidated, you didn't become self-serving, you simply continued to see me. And for that, I am eternally grateful." There were tears in her eyes now, and Lucas felt his own emotions threatening to overflow. "Night isn't just about philanthropy," Emma continued, turning to the crowd. "It's about authenticity. It's about breaking down the walls we've built between ourselves based on money, status, power. It's about seeing people as they truly are. And it's about having the courage to be who you truly are, even when it's scary." The crowd was in total silence. And then, starting with one person and spreading, they began to applaud. It was applause that grew into an ovation. People stood up, recognizing not only Emma's honesty but the courage it took to expose herself in that way. Lucas looked to where his parents were sitting. They seemed shocked, processing everything they had just heard and seen. But there was something more in their expressions: respect, admiration perhaps, and just possibly the beginning of an understanding. After the speech, Emma and Lucas were surrounded by people wanting to congratulate them, ask questions, express support. It was overwhelming but also liberating. The secret was out. The truth was exposed. And they were together, facing it all side by side. Eventually, Lucas's parents managed to reach them. There was a tense moment when the four of them faced each other. Then, to Lucas's surprise, his mother reached out her hand to Emma. "Miss Anderson," she said formally, "it seems we have a lot to talk about." Emma shook her hand. "Yes, we do. And please call me Emma. Just Emma." It was the beginning of something. Not an immediate or easy reconciliation, but a beginning. An acknowledgement that perhaps, just perhaps, they had misjudged everything from the start. The night continued, but Lucas and Emma eventually escaped to a quiet balcony, away from the crowd. They stood there gazing at the city lights, absorbing everything that had happened. "We really did it," Lucas said, still somewhat incredulous. Emma laughed, a sound of pure relief. "We did. And there's no going back now." Lucas pulled her close. "I don't want to go back. I want to move forward. With you, with all your versions, with all the complications, with everything." Emma kissed him, and in that kiss there was a promise. A promise that they would find a way, even if it was difficult.